welcome to episode number 13 of the LSR Podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined each and every week by the brightest minds in all of the gaming industry. We have two of those minds with a third joining us a little bit later. I have Dustin Gowker. I have Adam Candy. We will have Jess Wellman at the end of the show to talk a little bit about what's going on in Pennsylvania. Guys, we are on iTunes, we are on Stitcher, we are on Spotify, and now on Google Podcasts as well. You cannot miss us, Dustin. Even if they tried, they cannot miss this awesome podcast.
If you use like AOL, maybe you might not find us.
This is true. This is true. Maybe if they are on some odd way, if they're still on Netscape or whatever. Is Netscape, was that a browser or was that a internet? What was Netscape?
I think you could add email. You could browse on it.
Okay.
I think they still exist too. I'm not sure, but I think so.
Look at that. Adam probably knows. Adam, you had Netscape, didn't you? You used Netscape. You seem like the type. You were a Netscape guy.
I mean, I had the T-shirt and everything. No, Netscape was a browser.
Okay, it was not one of the actual providers. Okay, all right. I'm a little
not like
off.
Prodigy. No.
Yeah, that's where we go. There we go. Prodigy. You can find us on the Twitter machine at LSP Report as well, and you can take advantage of all of the awesome articles and everything, of course, at LegalSportsReport.com. Let's kick things off here, Dustin, with West Virginia. We were pretty excited about West Virginia joining back into the ranks of online sports betting, but that is not the case as we sit here on Thursday.
Yes, it's been kind of off and on again in West Virginia. We were really hopeful that you West Virginians or people nearby were going to be able to bet in West Virginia on apps real soon. But DraftKings Sportsbook, there's been a report from the West Virginia Lottery that complications around servers and need to adhere to the Wire Act have slowed down a launch for DraftKings Sportsbook. So as we sit here, I don't think we have a great timeline. It could be next week. It could be months from now. But right now, they're dealing with some problems and trying to figure it out. So I wish I had better news to report to you if you're in West Virginia. But the wait goes on at least till the end of this podcast, because as we start, there's no online sports betting in West Virginia. So
if you live in West Virginia, are they just waiting on DraftKings and DraftKings only? There's nobody else waiting in the weeds here? Is this basically like DraftKings or bust?
For the short term, yes. I mean, William Hill and FanDuel both have partnerships in the state. I'm sure they plan to go live, but they are not imminent. DraftKings is the only one we know that is kind of imminent. So yeah, it's DraftKings or bust right now. So hopefully you will like the DraftKings app. Otherwise, you're screwed.
And again, follow along LSP Report. You can follow along at Legal Sports Report. When that does go live, we will certainly be the first to let you know about that. Adam, we talked about my beloved home state of Louisiana. We thought that things were looking really, really smooth a couple weeks ago. We come back and then we think that things are doom and gloom and absolutely never happening. And in true Louisiana fashion, now we just don't know what the hell is going on.
I have no idea what's going on. Is that a good thing to say on the LSR podcast?
I mean,
it probably isn't ultimately, but what's going on in Louisiana right now is there were a lot of machinations behind the scenes here to try to revive what we thought was a dead bill. Sports betting had taken what we thought was a mortal hit. There had been some amendments added in committee that included video poker, that included league data, that were just not going to fly. And it was pretty well known that bill wasn't going anywhere. But the sponsor and some others tried to revive it by voting that bill onto the floor. They weren't able to do that. Eventually, they were able to find another bill as a vehicle to carry sports betting, that, of course, having to do with some fantasy sports issues. And so ultimately, what happened was the Senate voted for these changes. The House overwhelmingly said, no, we're not going for this. And this bill is on its way to conference committee right now. So what can happen in conference committee? A lot. Look back at Indiana and realize that, that mobile betting went back in conference after having been stripped out in committee. So stay tuned with Louisiana.
All right, Adam, with this deal with Louisiana, I mean, one of the things that we thought that was just going to happen was that sports betting was just going to actually be a formality, because we did have fantasy sports pass in the majority of the state here. And really and truly, this just kind of hit a snag because people came in and started Frankensteining the bill at the end, right? Is that what went on?
Yeah, there were some forces at play here, including the leagues getting their official data added late in the game in committee. And you make a very good point that's important to remember about this. This is just a bill to get it onto the ballot. This was not a bill to legalize. So this was the same situation as fantasy sports went through in the election this year, where it was to put it on the ballot, go parish by parish, and have the vote that way. So that's essentially what we're trying to accomplish here in Louisiana.
Very interesting stuff. And of course, as you know, their next door neighbor in Mississippi does have sports betting. So certainly something that we need to keep an eye on there in Louisiana. Dustin, let's talk a little bit about Alabama and daily fantasy sports.
Yeah, remember daily fantasy sports? That's
remember that
exciting,
DFS stuff? That's what we only used to talk about. I know. That was like
I'm old enough to remember when Legal Sports Report was actually called Online Daily Fantasy Report. I wrote for it when it was still that. And for a long time, that's all we did. But now we're back. We're back talking about daily fantasy sports. Alabama governor signed a law legalizing it there. I'm sure if you're an Alabama resident, you remember the days of, I think it was 2016, when the Attorney General said, DraftKings and FanDuel, you're illegal gambling, please stop. They actually did stop. And then bills have been rolling through every year since, and it was actually ridiculed as the deadest bill of the session, I think, in one of those years. This year passed by overwhelming majorities. DraftKings, FanDuel, and any other DFS sites out there, Fantasy Draft, etc. I think they all plan to be back in. I don't have a time frame for you, but it's wild to think about in the history of DFS. Once upon a time, like DraftKings and FanDuel were only serving like 39 states. Once all of these other states get back up and running, Alabama, Iowa, where it was never legalized, and then Louisiana, where we talked about parish by parish. That's going to be 3 states that they add in, and they're going to be in 44 states. Only 6 states in the union where you don't have DFS, which is, when you look back at history of it, it could have gone the other direction really quickly, right, and they turned it around.
Sad trombone with Nevada being one of those states that does not have it. Sad trombone. Yeah.
Not going to happen anytime soon either.
Yeah, certainly not going to happen anytime soon. Adam, let's talk a little bit about New York. It would not be an LSR podcast if we do not talk about New York.
No, and thankfully we don't have to listen to Eric Ramsey talk about it this week. Thank God. And to you listeners, you get a break. New York has about 2 weeks left in its legislative session. It feels like, it always feels like New York has just about enough time to get something done, and we'll find out if something really happens. But another late amendment coming in this time from Senator Joseph Adabo. It'll be mirrored by Assemblyman Gary Pretlow. This is to try to get the racetracks and sports stadiums in on sports betting in the great state of New York. There had been some concerns raised at the last New York hearing by the tracks saying that they wanted in. There's an amendment being proposed right now by Adabo and Pretlow that would accomplish that on a delay. They would have to sit out for a while in order to get in. Similar for stadiums, and it's some complicated language to try to work around the constitutional restriction on mobile sports betting, such as it is in the eyes of Governor Cuomo, where stadiums would need to work in an affiliate manner, and the servers would still have to be located within licensed casinos, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The point is to try to get self-service betting kiosks in a lot of the arenas in New York. We have a good article at Legal Sports Report right now. I'm not going to name the individual stadiums that would be in, those would be out. You can go and check out that article for more information to that end. They would also be on a delay that it would essentially give traditional sports betting a head start in getting going in New York.
It is always something in New York, an ongoing drama. Maybe, Dustin, we should just start online NewYorkReport.com, and then, because it seems like it's always something, right?
Yeah, we could fill up a site, I think, with the match stations of what's going on in New York every week. The other part of it is we also have, I think we just saw as we came on here, next week the New York State Gaming Commission is going to release its rules on sports betting at the 4 upstate casinos. So that's one step closer to actually having at least retail sports betting, if not online sports betting. This bill that Adam was just talking about deals with online, but retail is still going ahead. So if you want to visit a casino, looks like sometime in the coming weeks or months, you're going to be able to bet somewhere in New York.
And a pretty big thing went down here. Of course, we have not talked about the Wire Act in a little while on this podcast here, but we were sitting and across comes some breaking news on our Twitter machine a couple of days ago, and we have some really big Wire Act news here, Dustin.
Yeah, the federal court case, which I'm sure we've talked about a few times in the past on the podcast, which pitted the New Hampshire lottery against the Department of Justice. The latter had said that the Wire Act applied to all forms of interstate gambling, not just sports betting. That went contrary to what the DOJ had said back in 2011 under the administration of President Barack Obama. So we had this federal court case that manifested earlier this year. A federal judge basically handed a huge victory to New Hampshire, saying that the Wire Act only applies to sports betting. So this cleared up pretty much anything to deal with online gaming, online lottery, multi-state lottery games like Powerball and the Mega Millions, things like that. There's a little bit of question on the scope of this. It was a pretty big beatdown from the judge to the DOJ, but it's likely confined just to this case, and you'd have to see other rulings in other jurisdictions for this to be widely applied. All that being said, this is still a big win. If this had gone the other way, it would have had a really chilling effect on online gambling, I think. But this kind of, I think, gives people a little more optimism for the future of online gambling, in that a federal judge pretty clearly stated that online casino, online lottery, and just regular lottery products don't apply. Wire Act only applies to sports betting. So, yeah, this was a pretty big decision.
Now, Adam, we were certainly pleased whenever this came through here, but the reality is they could appeal, right? And not only could they appeal, we understand, we know that there are powers that be, very wealthy powers that be behind the scenes, that this stuff is going to continue to be in the news so long as that money continues to funnel in.
There is some question as to the appetite for the Department of Justice in terms of that you just referenced, in terms of just how far that favor goes. But there's also been some legal analysis out there that a couple of other interesting things could happen when it comes to this case. One is that there is the potential for this to set some precedent that the Department of Justice reportedly would not like in other cases unrelated to online gaming. So that might be one reason for an appeal. The other thing we have to look at is the potential that the Department of Justice could revise its opinion to essentially say that it only applies to online lottery, which of course would put other forms of iGaming still under the gun. Now, sports betting, as we talked about at Legal Sports Report this week, sports betting essentially was unaffected by this. The questions regarding online sports betting really don't change at all with anything that happened inside this opinion. That still varies wildly in terms of legal opinion as to what the danger is for online sports betting. So I think if you were going to place money on it now, you would say you would probably expect an appeal, but it's not a certainty.
Last time...
I was going to say, let's also remember that the judge in this case said he expects the Supreme Court to actually get to this case because he thinks the issues at play here are that important, and that it's not going to necessarily be it might be a case that they're interested in. So we could be headed back to the Supreme Court on a case involving a federal gambling statute.
Very, very interesting. Now, Dustin, we talked about the I states. We named a whole podcast the I states because there were so many things going on. One of those I states being Illinois. We have been up, we have been down, we've been left, we've been right. We have been all around this issue here with Illinois. And then all of a sudden, poof, Illinois happened.
Yeah, we headed into the weekend having absolutely no idea what was going on in Illinois. There were opinions ranging from it was totally dead to, oh yeah, this is definitely going to happen. I heard the whole gamut, but they brokered a deal. Basically, all became a bipartisan measure led by the governor there, J.B. Pritzker, and they actually got as a part of a larger budget deal, they got sports betting done in Illinois. So can't sit here and give you a timeline of when anything's going to launch, but yes, Illinois, you have a law. You're gonna be betting probably in a casino in Chicago eventually. You're going to be possibly betting in sports betting in sports venues around the state, and casinos, OTBs, the whole gamut. So it's coming. The bigger question is online, which I'm sure we'll talk about here a little bit more, and maybe let Adam talk about that some more.
Adam, thoughts on Illinois here?
Yeah, I have thoughts on Illinois. The more we read into this bill, the more we see the potential for problems here. There are some major issues inside this bill. There's some very confusing language in terms of how the official data situation is going to work, in terms of the pricing. There is a lot of concern about the tax rate, and there's a lot of concern about the licensing fees. Ultimately, what's really scary about this bill for the industry is that so much changed at such a late hour that it's very difficult to now start to unravel exactly what's inside the bill. You know, it was attached to a larger package. It made it a must vote for a lot of senators and representatives who probably, as a standalone bill, might not have gone for the provisions of sports betting that were put in Illinois. So this is what's dangerous with last second legislation, when you're having to now unravel pages upon pages of what really went down and what could ultimately be some unintended consequences.
We look at these. We look at these bills, Dustin, and you know, as some of the ones we clap at and we say, okay, this is, you know, something that we're okay with. We look at some of these other ones and say, this has good points, this has bad points. This Illinois bill, you know, from your standpoint, having basically read every bill that's come across over the last few years, is this the worst? Is this the worst one you've seen?
Man, no, I think there's bills that haven't passed that are worse than this, but this is like there's a Kentucky bill, I think, where they wanted to tax sports betting handle at 20%. So that, I'd say that one was worse. That's pretty bad. But this one, it ranks up there, and I put this out there before too. Like, I agree with Adam. This is, I don't know, I'll stop short of horrible. It's a very bad bill. I mean, but I think, knowing the intricacies of Illinois politics, I've covered this going back to 2015 when they first started trying to pass daily fantasy bills, and they've never actually passed daily fantasy there. The politics there are just insane. So while this is a bad bill, I think it might also have been perhaps the best bill that we could have hoped for out of Illinois, which is a scary prospect, but might be the truth. So it's not good. I mean, it really throttles online betting at the beginning, and just generally you're gonna have to sign up and deposit and withdraw in person for a very long time after start. I think it's 640 days is the current time frame, if I'm not mistaken. So you can't just sign up remotely like you do in New Jersey, or you will be in Pennsylvania, or fund your account remotely. You're gonna have to actually go to one of these casinos, sign up for an account and put money in, take money out, that's just not a very good user experience at all. It kind of throttles who can get into the market. You have DraftKings and FanDuel who, you know, they might be able to partner with some folks, but common sense says they probably won't, and will try to get their own online license later on. But that doesn't end until this long kind of moratorium on online only licenses. So, like, it's for revenue and for combating the black market, it's just not a very good bill at all, I think, in the short term and probably the long term too.
And I think to add to that, Dustin, you said it's the best that Illinois could accomplish. And I understand seeing it in terms of that vacuum with what you've seen out of Illinois. I think when we widen it out to, you know, the country in general, the dangerous part is the precedent that it sets for other states.
Totally.
We know when it comes to the Illinois bill, they look to Tennessee to see that Tennessee was the first bill to include official data. That gave Representative Zaleski, who put official data into the Illinois bill in the first place, some cover to do it. So I think the takeaway for me from Illinois is, if the bill was going to be this bad, it might just have been better not to pass anything at all, despite the fact that it might be the best that Illinois itself could have done.
I totally agree.
That was actually my next. That was actually my next question, Dustin. Is this a case where not necessarily something's better than nothing?
Yeah, I mean, for Illinois in a vacuum, it's good because, like I said, I think they might not have hoped for anything better. So if they're going to do it, why not do it now? But I totally agree. From us sitting here and looking at it at a macro view, like, yeah, people can now look at Illinois as like, man, look at all this nonsense they're doing. We should just do that too. Like, luckily we didn't see people really copy Pennsylvania and the high tax rates, licensing fees. Illinois probably was emboldened by Pennsylvania by seeing that, because we've seen a lot of common sense legislation as far as fees and taxes and just other requirements in other states. So this one's on the other side. This one's definitely more on the Pennsylvania side of the ledger, where it's going to be harder for operators to make money. It's not going to compete as well with the black market, we don't think. And yeah, there's problems. So yeah, I hope nobody copies the Illinois model. That's for sure.
And now it is time to bring in our resident expert on all things Pennsylvania, Miss Jess Wellman. Jess, thank you so much for taking some time. And we actually have things to talk about this time. These are no hypotheticals. These are no maybes. We actually have a topic for you to bring your expertise with.
I actually have a couple topics for you today. I'm multifaceted.
Well, let's talk about a little bit about Pennsylvania and why we are so excited in the online gambling sports betting realm when it comes to Pennsylvania this week.
Okay, let's start with the good of this. But be aware, because it's Pennsylvania, there is a but coming to this sentence. The great news is Sugar House online casino is or online sportsbook rather, is live in Pennsylvania. They pass through testing. They're good to go. You can, if you have a desktop or an Android phone, place bets. You can in-game wager on the NBA Finals. And you can do VIG free bets on the NBA Finals. That's their big promotion around launch. And that is definitely good news. We've waited a year for this. It's finally here.
Now, Dustin, one of the things that we do have going on here, though, is if you are a person that has an iPhone and you are trying to access through the App Store, you are going to be a little disappointed.
Yeah, so the big part of the launch of Sugar House and just the bigger problem in general in sports betting and online casino right now is Apple not letting apps into the App Store, which is, Sugar House went live, just mobile, just on mobile web and Android, direct download. You can't go into the App Store and get the app. So we've been trying to track that down and why that is and what's going on. And there's actually just a revision this week in Apple's guidelines for the App Store to say, online gambling, you have to be building natively for iOS. You can't have non-native iOS functionality in your app. So that has been kind of really brought around to everyone, like why Apple's been a problem. Like we actually go back to New Jersey last year, and we know apps were coming behind everything else. People were launching without Apple going later, and now there's been this bright line where online gambling apps have to have that as part of their part of what they're putting out there. So you have to be natively designed for iOS. You can't have functionality that's just mobile that works on iOS. So this is a big deal. And Jess, go ahead.
I was going to just chime in. If you're not super tech savvy, let's just kind of break it down a little. If you're not like on iOS, what does that mean? There are kind of two ways you can make an app. You can build it specifically for the iPhone, and that's what Dustin is talking about on iOS, or you can use code HTML5 and code it. And in most gambling apps, what they do is code in HTML5. There are some, one that I think I bet they'll be the first ones to get on Apple in Pennsylvania is FanDuel. FanDuel is not going to run into the problem that Sugar House did and arguably has an easier path to get there. But what Apple is saying is you can no longer code these outside elements that also work for Droid and other things. You have to build specifically to Apple, or else we really don't think we're going to let you in. There's two issues at play here, though. There's this term or this new rule that Dustin mentioned, and that's with HTML5 on online casino games and stuff. That's more the games themselves. If you recall, like Steve Jobs going after Flash, it's similar to this. They don't want them coded that way. So they're going to want all of these different casino games to be rebuilt for iPhone before they will let them on. And there's a deadline in there, too, that is a ridiculous time span to get something of this scope done, which is September 3rd.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess one of the things here, Dustin, just the takeaway here is if you are an Apple user, you can at least still sports bet. You just have to do it through your computer.
Yeah, you're even going to get stopped. I think we believe generally through even if you're using Safari on iOS still, right, Jess? That's still the case?
You still can't do it. They're saying there's a workaround, and I would guess that Safari is a piece of that, or a browser-based solution, considering the App Store situation just seems to be getting worse, not getting better.
If you're using Safari, If you're using Safari as a browser, you don't deserve to sports bet in Pennsylvania.
No, not on your computer, on your phone, Matt.
What
browsing on your phone.
Yeah,
How do you get the internet on your phone?
You can still get Chrome.
You got Chrome, man. I mean,
okay.
What are these people doing using?
I would
Safari?
think Chrome could be a solution too, as well. But yeah, I mean, I don't mean to be alarmist. This Apple terms and conditions update's a big deal because nobody's going to finish this project in 3 months. It's really not possible.
And this spills into New Jersey too. Like, this is, if you want to update your app, you have the same dynamic that's going on in Pennsylvania, which is pretty much everyone. If you have a sports book that's inside an online, that's part of an online casino or linked to it directly, you're going to have the same problem. So you might be kicked out of the App Store as well. I don't think Justin and I are crying wolf here when this is a big deal. And when you add on top, like, we know and casino operators know there's just so much traffic is coming from mobile, and the majority of that is coming for iOS and not for Android. So this is for acquiring new customers and for the future of the industry, and at least in the short term, this paints a dire scenario. Now maybe things get worked out. We don't have total visibility into everything that's going down, but this is a big deal.
Yeah, as it is, if you don't get this done by September 3rd, it's not just like Sugar House in PA is new and they're having trouble getting listed. There's wiggle room there to try to bargain. This is in black and white. If you don't do this, they're going to boot you out of the store, which means no new downloads on iPhone 2 days before the NFL season starts. So they have to, the second piece besides the HTML games is what the Wrapped app, which is just basically turning your website into an app-friendly version of itself. That part, seems to be more progress in getting Apple to think about listing them. But even building an iOS sportsbook app that is standalone with no casino, to do that by September 3rd, unless you are the biggest gaming companies in like the European ones with hundreds and hundreds of designers on hand, it's really not feasible because you have to build it and then you have to get it vetted by DGE and PGCB, and then you have to get it through Apple. That's
the way
I understand.
The way I understand it, Jess, too, is that it's if you have a sports book and you plan on, or you have a corresponding online casino, they're not even letting you do it. They wouldn't even let you do the sports book standalone. They're just making you do it. Why that is, I don't know, but the people who are in maybe the best shape are the sports books who don't have an online casino, and obviously that throttles their ceiling. But William Hill, only a sports book. DraftKings, only a sports book, albeit has casino functionality within the sports book. PointsBet, FanDuel, while it has a relationship with Betfair, is not currently an all-in-one platform. So these are the ones that have a chance to sneak by and might be in the best position in the short term. And again, this is a lot of speculation because this is kind of a new development. People are just starting to talk about it, and we're trying to just wrap our heads around it. But there's a lot that's going to happen in the next several months as everybody tries to determine the fallout on this.
A very interesting story indeed, and certainly, as you guys mentioned, something that could have very wide-reaching ramifications as we continue with expansion and in states that are already live and going here. Guys, as we mentioned, we are on iTunes, we are on Stitcher, we are on Spotify, and now on Google Podcast. You cannot miss us, so please go subscribe, rate, review, do all of those things. We enjoy the 5 stars, and please leave us some thoughts on what we could do better, because we are always looking to make this thing a better podcast. You can find us on the Twitter machine at LSP Report as well. For Dustin, for Jess, for Adam, I'm Matt. Talk to you guys next week.